JJ, I know that you've been with us for 2 hours, so I don't want to keep you any longer. But if there are any other questions for Dr. Racinas before he leaves, again, he has worked all day. He came home and he's in his scrubs and joining us for the last 2 hours, so I can't thank him enough. But if there's any other questions for him so that we could have anyone ask, and then I'd like to let him go and get some rest.
I'm just wondering if you could comment. I don't know if you saw my big long chat there, but
Yes.
can you hear me? Hopefully. My internet's a little iffy. I was just wondering, so one of the things that's being processed, certainly in my little world here, is a number of friends and connections who are concerned about the Mikovits book and the her what she's saying about Fauci and about the whole issue of Bill Gates and vaccines and everything. And I hope that hope you can all hear me. My screen is very choppy, but I guess I've been processing that and trying to be open to perspectives. And I think there's some legitimate questions that are in some of the things that she writes about, and most people don't obviously have clinical knowledge at the level that you all would, and it's hard, right, that most people don't have access to that information. And I think there's the experience of broken trust or people not having their needs adequately met in systems the way they are in our governments. So I was wondering if you could comment on that and mental health in light of that. Thank you.
Very good. You did cut out a tiny bit here and there, Giselle, but I got the gist of it, and I appreciate the paragraph that you wrote, because I do think there is a psychology to this, and it isn't, when we talk about mental health, your comment speaks to more of the overall health of all of us as a community together, and our ability to stay bonded together with us and have our priorities straight under threat. And it is a really unfortunate consequence, but you make a good point that this is not an all or nothing proposition. So I have two thoughts that I associate to when I think about where this problem could be remedied. One is a harder one, and I'll mention it first because I don't have an optimistic way to fix it right away. But when we face this crisis of suspicion of expertise, where we get this automatic resistance to being told things and then correspondingly being told what to do in response to them or alongside, and there's this automatic rejection of expertise. What I would like to see us think about in a really intentional way in our country is to think about restructuring educational and economic systems to make a larger percentage of our population feel and genuinely know that they too are experts in something. Because I think if more people felt that they really knew something, were really good at it, and we all as a society valued them for it, they would then be less likely to look at someone else's expertise and dismiss it out of hand, because they would first value it for themselves. And then when someone came on and said, I have something serious to tell you about a virus, a really horrible thing that's killing people that you can't even see, but I'm asking you to believe in its existence because I know something about it. Please listen to me. People would be less likely to say, what? You're full of shit. That thing isn't even, I can't even see it. It can't possibly even be a thing. You've made this thing up. You're just trying to make my life more difficult. But if they themselves could say to themselves honestly, I live in a world that really values me for my ability to craft things with my hands and make products that people depend upon, and they pay me a reasonable wage for it. They lift me up and they say, he works with wood in a way that doctor guy over there could never do. And that's true. I could never do that kind of work. The problem is we don't value those folks. We fight over whether or not they even can make minimum wage, and we don't give them resources to feel like they have expertise. And so you can see why they would want to react against any other expert who already has power telling them what to do. Like, who's this guy who already makes $500,000 a year having the nerve to make my life even more difficult than it already is? So it's easy for folks like that to then get sucked up into conspiracy theories. So that's one thing. It takes a big effort to fix the situation through that mechanism, but I really do think that that's a main way that it gets fixed. The other aspect of it that's a little bit lower hanging fruit, a little bit easier to deal with, is this idea of really needing to ask before we tell, asking people where they're coming from before we say the way that things are. This tension between certainty and strength and loud voices being equated with strength, and actually humility being something that is communicated as weak, has got us in a bad bind, because we all should have acknowledged that we should have had a whole lot of humility when we first learned of this new pathogen and didn't truly know what to do. But the reason to then take it extra seriously and to really lock down, be careful, take care of each other, was because we could not predict where it was going to go. Rather than saying, I certainly know what's going to happen. Here's this model, and if you don't follow my model, then there's a problem. And, I think Fauci's remarkable because he is truly humble, despite the fact that he knows a ton of things. But he's been put up in a position where he is now the target. But the reality is he models humility pretty darn well, despite the fact that he knows incredible amounts of relevant things. But he's working for an administration that otherwise doesn't say. The reason why we're taking this so seriously is we all have to acknowledge that we are all fearful, top down. And it is not just my need to be a leader for you, but also my fear for you, because I am your servant. I am responsible for you. That's what makes me want to slow down and take this seriously and ask you to come along with me, rather than insisting, do it this way, don't do it this way. Certainty, when there is no reason to be certain, is really hollow, and it resonates badly with people. And so, Mikovic plays on that, right? She's able to say, these people they just always seem to know, but there's another way of looking at it. And if we don't model openness to some other way of looking at it, we think we're fighting against her and we're going to win, but she's got the upper hand because she models uncertainty. And that's something we need to embrace too. We really do. And anyway, I'm sort of rambling at this point, but openness to the possibility of uncertainty is actually powerful, because then it makes it so that certain, this side versus that side battle, you take away the battle and you say, actually, your uncertainty over there is actually part of my way of thinking too. Right? I embrace what you have to worry about as well. I just have more things that weigh us on this side. And if we go that route, what if we're right? What if we're wrong? If we go this route, what if we're right? What if we're wrong? Well, the consequences of choosing this are safer. So that's the reason why I would prefer that we go my way. But I get it that I'm not certain. But if we go your way of thinking about how it is, the risk is going to be much greater. That way of modeling the discussion would probably be more palatable to more people. That'd be my guess.
That's an outstanding answer. Outstanding. And I just want to add one thing, if you'll allow me.
Sure.
The recognition of humility as a strength and not a weakness is absent right now.
Yeah.
So when Fauci said this poses a small risk to us in the United States in January, when he was asked about it, people are pointing at him and saying he was wrong. When Surgeon General said we don't need masks right now in February, people point back to it and say, look, they already said don't use masks. And they're using a certain position of authority to identify as a source of truth, rather than truth being an authority. So one thing that kind of raised the hair on the back of my neck initially in your answer was, let's treat everyone as possessing some expertise and like, have respect for the expertise that people have. You're a mechanic, you're a carpenter, and I do. and I live my life like that, and we all should. Like I said to you the other day, my dad considered his healthcare team not just the nurses in the CCU, the cardiac. It was the guy that cleared the snow from the path from his car to the hospital. That was part of the healthcare team. Okay, everyone is that allowed him to do his work is part of the healthcare team and deserves exactly the same respect. That's
Right.
one thing. But I value humility more.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I want everybody to understand that even not even I take certain pride in saying I was wrong, because it means that I'm intellectually plastic enough to recognize and change an opinion.
Yeah. Well, here, let me loop back around to something that has been mostly the focus of your previous installments of this on my way out. I'm going to loop it back around to the topics that you've been spending more time addressing. You've touched on a couple of times tonight this concern about us overreacting and mobilizing more resources than were needed and over calculating the number of ventilators and all these sorts of things, and folks then saying, we overdid it, and there was harm instead. One of the things that happened, actually, we mobilized all those ventilators because medicine up to this point had told us that when people have really ugly looking scans on their lungs, when their testing of their oxygen levels in their blood are really dreadfully abnormal, and their oxygen saturation readings that we get are so low, we need to jump in and support their breathing with a machine, because otherwise they cannot survive. Because that's what all of medicine up to this point had basically told us about what the parameters are when we jump in. And so since we saw those patients with those values, those lab tests, those manifestations, the doctor said, holy crow, do we need a ton of ventilators.
Yeah.
But you know what happened? It isn't just a matter of doing a great job of flattening the curve, which made it so, thank goodness we didn't need as many ventilators. That's the way Cuomo likes to tell that story, because that's, that politically helps him in a way. But there's medicine to this too that is driven by humility. Pulmonary care doctors realized that their assumption that this was the typical acute lung disease that they had already become acquainted with was actually modified by experience. They started to realize, what, these numbers are extraordinarily abnormal and low. However, people are still alive. They're still breathing and their brains are functioning. How is this possible? And since they were willing to embrace that newness, the next step that they took was what? This. They started intubating fewer people. They put fewer people on ventilators despite how bad the numbers looked. And it turned out that their outcomes were either as good or even better because they caused less lung damage from the ventilator itself, and they supported people through the illness naturally on their own. So what did that mean? That meant we needed fewer ventilators. But we never would have known we needed fewer ventilators unless the doctors were willing to be humble and say, holy crow, my set of tools puts me at the front line and I have to do something, but now I need to do something different from what I've ever done before.
Yeah.
And that changes the resource calculation
Exactly.
on the fly. And then we have all these ventilators that we don't need. Is that a bad thing? Would it have been better had the doctors say, nope, I still intubate everybody whose numbers look like this? And what do? They kill more people, but they use the ventilators. Thank God they used the ventilators that we gave them. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
No, the humility is what allowed us to grow and move our practice forward. So, that's true not just of mental health and flexibility and things like that. That's true of the medical science for the lung as well too. So I'll leave you with this. Mental flexibility is a hallmark of mental well-being. Flexibility is really a hallmark of it. We can talk about pathology, DSM diagnoses, label people with all sorts of disorders, but we don't tend to talk about the positive side of mental health. And there are markers of what we know makes people better off and less diseased and more able to do well. And so when our latest crop of psychiatrists in training graduated this year, this was the graduation speech to them. It was to remind them that flexibility and belief in the ability of human beings to adapt is actually a sign that we are on the right side of things. And that's what we should be enhancing. So although psychiatrists are trained to identify abnormality and sickness for a living, we should also be recognizing when we see strength and resilience, and we should be working to enhance it. So, keep your head up, keep fighting the good fight, keep making sure that you beat back misinformation. But also when you see positivity, embrace it, highlight it, and lift each other up about it. And if it requires vastly changing our routines, finding a way to do things in a new way, that is a sign that you are on the side of survival. True mental health means making an adaptation to a new situation and not saying it cannot be done because this was the way it always was and I rely upon it, but really being open to the possibility of a new way of doing it and not just saying it's either all or none. It's either the way it was because I count on that and that's the meaning of my life, or I can't have it. Then what's the corollary of that? Then why go on? So there has to be a way of thinking about a new way of doing it. So a new way going forward. We'll do it together. I look forward to coming back to one of these in the future. I know you'd like to keep talking, but I'm going to leave you to wrap it up on your own. Okay. If that's all right.
Thank you so much, Dr. JJ Racimus. Be safe, be healthy. We so appreciate you joining us, and we'll have you back with a great honor to have you.
Absolutely. So we want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. We are at our time limit for our live stream. So we're going to jump off of that now. If people want to hang out a little bit longer, we will leave the room open. Sanjay will stick around, I think, and we can go from there. But we will be back next week. The link for our broadcast next week will be different. So if you've bookmarked the link to the last couple weeks, there will be a new one that will be posted on the page, in the groups, in the events, in the email, everywhere. We will have to get that out to you for next week. So once again, my name is John Taw, and I want to again thank Anna, and JJ and Sanjay for their time tonight. Once again, we will stick around a little bit longer. Have a great night, everyone.